If you know a veteran, you might want to watch this. Hello, Francine Julene here, and welcome to Parents Talk. We're going to do something a little different today. I'm here with my two fellow veterans, and we're going to talk about something that's very important to the veteran community and, well, to the families and even parents of veterans. I have with me Jody Martin, who is my fellow children's author, Soldier Mom, and a member of Children's Authors Unite. And our special guest today is Ashton Croner, and I am going to let Ashton explain this wonderful project and this amazing challenge that she and her husband are setting out on in June. Ashton, tell everyone all about yourself.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. Jody, is a pleasure to be able to meet you. So my name is Ashton. I am a Marine Corps veteran. I served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then I'm also the co-founder and current chair for the Veteran Cancer Network. We started this actually recently. We started it in 2025, and it stems from, our own personal kind of growth. My husband, he's a late stage cancer survivor. He's also another Marine Corps veteran. And he was diagnosed with stage 3A testicular cancer whenever he was 34 years old. And it was a challenge just to be able to get that diagnosis. And through that, over the last couple of years, we kept on asking ourselves one, why did this happen? And what can we do in order to be able to, help with this particular cause, whenever it comes to veterans getting cancer. Veterans historically are more prone to cancer diagnosis, and that's because of toxic exposure and history. But with the post 9/11 generation, they're actually more prone to being able to get it at a younger age. Case in point, my husband. So we started the Veteran Cancer Network, basically wanting to be the resource that we wish that we had when we were going through his chemotherapy. We wanted to focus on the entire family because we know that when it comes to medical
Plus 17.
diagnoses, it is a challenge for the entire family. It impacts everybody. And so that is our goal there. And one of the things that we're working on is reducing the stigmas whenever it comes to cancer. A lot of people think of that Hollywood version of cancer that, you're immediately going to go through this, horrific experience. And yes, it is horrific at times, but there's also a lot of hope and healing that can happen during that time frame as well. But we also wanted to talk about, age and screening specifically. And so this summer, my husband and I are going to embark on probably the toughest journey that we've ever had outside of cancer. And we're going to be bicycling from Northeast Florida to the Green Cove Springs area, all the way up to Washington, D.C., to talk about cancer and early detection and the importance of getting screened.
That is a long bike ride. But before we get into that bike ride, I want to ask Jody to how you were an officer in the Army, and how big an impact would it have on our veteran community to get this testing early?
Well, it would be huge. I was sitting there just completely acknowledging what Ashton was saying as far as, you know, as a military member who did multiple tours overseas, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, as Ashton did, um, we were exposed to toxins we didn't even know, right? I will say that over the years, VA has gotten, I won't say better, but that's the word I'm going to use, better about more quickly recognizing that there are things that we don't see when we're deployed that can affect our health. They're still not perfect at it. It still takes a very long time for them to say, okay, your deployments or your time on a ship or in a desert or wherever that may be could have affected your health. And this is how it's being connected. So if there's testing out there that we can say, hey, get this early and often because you were exposed to burn pits, whatever that may be, I think that would save a tremendous amount of struggle that some of our guys and gals are going through to try to find the right testing to let them know what's going on with their bodies.
Okay, Ashton, you have been collecting signatures. Did you get all you needed? And what were those signatures for?
Oh my goodness. So, through this, we wanted to basically get the American public behind us. And so we created a petition on change.org talking about the issues at hand whenever it comes to veterans getting screening. And so, through our endeavors, we've encountered a lot of, basically a lot of people that are saying, yes, I want to be able to support, but they didn't know how, which is why we created the petition in the first place. But we are a little over 9,000 signatures. So a fun little story. My husband and I, we were getting ready to train this last Saturday. We were going on a 60-mile bike ride, and we woke up that morning and there was a little over 700 signatures. And the change.org petitioners, actually, the people that actually work behind the scenes and getting this website up and going, they had reached out a couple of weeks beforehand and they said, hey, we really believe in your mission. How can we support you? And would you be interested in having that elevated, through like an email campaign or put on, their website and so forth. And we're like, yeah, sure. Well, we woke up Saturday morning. There was only 700 signatures, and we rode for about 4.5 hours. Sorry, not miles, but 4.5 hours. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to get da ding, da ding, da ding, all these notifications. And in the matter of a 2.5 hour period, we had over 1,500 additional signatures, and it's just kind of exploded. So we don't have a number that we're trying to reach. What we do is have it as a date. So we actually go on our bike ride June 13th, and so we want to be able to collect as many signatures prior and during the ride. So when we get to Washington, D.C., and we start talking and educating members of Congress and the Senate about the issue of early cancer detection for our veterans, is we want to say, hey, the American public is behind us, which right now we are. I mean, we're getting overloaded with just the amount of love and support saying, hey, I've known somebody that's had, cancer, or, we need to do better for our veterans. It's just been an outpouring. But on our website, the veterancancernetwork.org, you can go on there, you can find our petition on there and be able to sign it. I would love to be able to go to DC and say that we have 15,000 signatures or 20,000 signatures. And I think that we'll be able to get that with the support of the community.
How can we help besides just signing the petition? Is there any other way we could help you achieve your goal?
Well, one of the things that my husband and I are doing is we have our own podcast, and we want to be able to elevate, people's stories, not just, veterans that are going through cancer or have gone through cancer, but their caregivers, their family members, because we understand that it is a family battle. And the importance of doing that is, because it's scary getting that diagnosis. I remember when my husband was going through that, and he had texted me saying, hey, I have cancer. And I'm like looking at my phone, like, what did he just text me? It immediately kind of put us into a completely different stratosphere, of the unknown. And we didn't really know how to navigate that. And so we want to share that story, not just ours, but others as well, and talking about, what does that screening process look like? What does chemo look like, or radiation, and what does life after chemotherapy look like, or after a cancer diagnosis? Because we don't want people to sit there and think that it is a, diagnosis that's going to end their life. And in some cases, it does happen, don't get me wrong, but there is so many advances whenever it comes to medical technology and the science behind there that people are living full and healthy lives afterwards. And so we're wanting to normalize that conversation and let people know that cancer isn't as scary as Hollywood makes it out, to be. Along that, we also highlight resources as well. And so if veterans, caregivers, a resource, we would love to be able to engage and start normalizing that conversation, along with, being able to just support us by following us on social media. Obviously, I will never not say no to money because, right now we are 100% self-funded, but really just getting that message out there and letting people know that there is a resource out there for them, and then sharing our mission.
I just read Jody's newest book of being in service, and it's a children's book. Jody, you wrote about how kids could be in service. How do you think a kid could help with Ashton's mission?
Well, I will say this, uh, Ashton, I write a lot about how service affects the family, right? The family serves right alongside. They feel it in different ways, obviously. They're not actually putting boots on the ground. But in the case of a diagnosis like this, again, the family is serving. So when I think about, let's say something happened to me and what my kids could have done at that time, especially when they were littles, they're all grown up now, so it's a little different. But if they were littles, there's things that they could do. One, they can rally around their parents, right? They can show love and service through helping out whoever is in the room that's sick. It could be male, female. In this case, it's your husband. But they also can share with their classmates, share with the school. You never know when you open up those doors, those kids go to school and they say, hey, my dad's sick. What if somebody at school, for whatever reason, is struck by that and they want to do a funding, right? A donation kind of event. So also it raises awareness, right? Again, there's all the parents that are involved with the school, with the kids. There's just so many things that they could do just by not being scared by the cancer diagnosis. Like you were saying, it's not as scary as it may seem. Maybe first off, I would imagine. But there are things that the kids could do, and that also helps them go through a healing process by just talking about it.
I think
That's what I would think.
it helps reduce the stigma. Like Ashton started from the very beginning, there's a stigma, especially for those of us who are in the military. We're taught to, well, shake it off, suck it up
Suck it
and
up,
move
Buttercup.
on. Yeah. And I think that the kids could help alleviate some of that by saying it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be sick. Let us help take care of you.
Kids are so resilient. I'm always amazed at how well they can adjust and how positive an outlook that they have. There have been times that I've had a very difficult situation going on, and when my kids were little, they would just say something or hug me or whatever. And it was a simple gesture and it went a long way. I do want to ask Ashton a question because you were saying a few things that I thought would really resonate with different groups that I'm associated with, veterans groups. So if other veteran groups want to get involved, so Francine and I both, and maybe you're part of it, Salty Women's Veterans Facebook
Yes.
group, right? Love them. Have you shared with people groups like that of what's going on? Because as we know, this affects us all. I don't think we could ever go in service and come out like not affected by something, right? So I'm just wondering, is there some way that like I can even share because I come from a very heavily veteran family as well. They would all love to participate, sign a petition at the very least, because that costs them nothing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say yes, I have shared on some of the pages. I know the servicewoman who serve page, Mary Ellen
Yeah.
Salzano, she's always sharing what we have going on. I share actually it's very interesting. Veterans, they are hard to deal with at times, and I could say that because I am one, but it's interesting because I can sit there and share a message, and depending on, who is commenting, like I've had people say, "Oh, you know what, I think it's kind of, you're just building something that the VA is already doing." And I'm like, well, yes, I am, but at the same time, there's people that don't use the VA, only 9 million veterans are using the VA. And so there's a little bit of that cynicism at times as well, whenever it comes to these groups. And the Salty Woman Veterans page is definitely like, that's why I love them so much, is because, you could sit there and have a really heavy day and then go find a completely inappropriate meme in that group or, some commentary. But it's interesting, the groups that we put out for and everything, some of them are so incredibly supportive and other ones are like, this is just another nonprofit. And I get it. Like I said, it's no hard feelings on that one. Or, even worse, I have veterans sitting there saying, well, I just don't want to know. I'm like, well, what do you mean you don't want to know? It's like, I just don't want to know if I have cancer. It's like, well, that's interesting because, it's easier to treat somebody in stage 1 or stage 2 versus stage 3 and 4. Wouldn't you want to know, earlier on so you can get treated? And they were like, no, I think I would just rather be surprised about it. And so that actually was very, very surprising to me. And I got that a lot in these Facebook groups that are, focused for veterans. But yes, when it comes to veteran organizations wanting to be able to help the ones that truly see, a need and, an understanding of what we're trying to do here. I mean, it's just natural. We want to be able to uplift those groups too, that collaboration. I know we use that word a lot in a lot of these different groups, but that is the only way for us to really be able to get our message out there is by sharing what others are doing and trying to kind of have that crossover message, on all these platforms. Um, but yeah, our biggest thing that we're looking for is people coming out, looking at our social medias, following us, because we're giving good advice on there, like looking out for some of the symptoms of, these various cancers or where we're going to be at on our bicycle ride. We would love for, the Salty Woman Veterans Group, to come cheer us on when we're in certain towns, going up the coast, because we want to talk to veterans locally. We want to uplift them. We want to hear about their businesses. I want to hear about these nonprofits or for-profits, healthcare programs. We want to hear for them to help highlight the work that they're doing as well, because in turn, it's going to help us.
I'm really kind of taken aback. Oh, Francine, you're muted. I'm really kind of taken aback by some of the feedback that you got on the cancer diagnoses, because I guess on one hand, as a veteran, we tend to go, we don't have any emotions. The military took that out of us. You know, I get what I get, right? But on the other hand, if you have ever known somebody who's had a diagnosis that had something to do with their service, it changes your outlook. So I think twofold, you're hitting people that are have not been affected by it in any way yet. And I think those are the people that are giving you the feedback you're getting. The other ones are that, well, there's three. The people that have already had a diagnosis in their life of some sort. So they're open to it and much more in tune with that. And lastly is the group that they don't they don't know to even be aware of it yet. So you just by getting out there and letting them know that this is available and that you can send them to other resources, whether it's the VA or other supportive areas, in a month, in a year, in 2 years, they're going to be like, hey, I remember, and they're going to come back. So you're planting the seeds for something that could also continue to grow. So even though you're getting some very few negative feedback, I think what you're doing is incredible and it's going to get bigger because the diagnoses aren't going away. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find it, I mean, it's definitely interesting that you say that because when I start sharing facts and statistics, that's when people actually start listening. So just to kind of throw, and it's kind of the boring part of the conversation, but 1 in 3 males and 1 in 4 females are going to have cancer in their, a cancer diagnosis in their lifetime. But with the veteran population, you're 30% more likely to get cancer. And that's because of the exposures, from all the way even from boot camp, where you were stationed at, just everything in general. And that goes with anybody that is in a particular job field where you're going to have, these different types of exposures. Firefighters are right along with us, the first responder community in general. So, it's going to impact somebody that you know in your life. I mean, heck, there's 3 of us here. If we have one more female, guess what? We are more likely to, have one of us in this room right now talking, getting cancer. So, we want to, sit there and tell people like, hey, you don't have to use us. You can use whoever you want, for your resources. Just that we're here in case you need us. We want the resource to be available for you because that's what we wanted when we were going through it.
I think the biggest resource you're providing is going up to Washington as an advocate for the rest of us. So, how can we support that trip?
Oh my goodness. So, first of all, my husband and I, we have a couple of, donors that are, helping fund us, but predominantly it's coming from our own pockets, so we are looking for places along the route that we can lay our heads each night. We have a safety vehicle, so we're going to need at least 2 rooms and a shower, preferably a shower, because it's going to be hot and stinky in June, and my husband and I have to kind of live next to each other. So, but trying to find somewhere that we could sit there and lay our heads, whether it's a hotel or somebody's couch or whatnot along the route, that's going to be really helpful. Meals as well. Like I said, there's at least 3 or 4 of us that are going to be biking or on with the safety vehicle, and so we want to be able to provide for them as well. But the biggest thing is prayers. Riding bicycles on the road is a relatively dangerous endeavor at times. So just keeping us in our thoughts and prayers at absolute minimum. And just letting people know that we're going to be going into, these towns. We have a couple of stops along the way that we're looking for organizations that we can reach out to. I know Savannah, Georgia is our very first stop that we're going to be stopping in. So Absolutely. We would love to be able to say hi. But we want to be able to sit there and again highlight those towns and what veteran resources are available, what veteran businesses are there. Same thing with healthcare and so forth. But Savannah, Georgia, Beaufort, South Carolina, Jacksonville, North Carolina, and Washington, D.C., those are our big days that we want to be able to hear from the community and let them know like what their needs are. Because when we're going up to D.C., yes, we are going to be talking to, the leadership over, on the Hill about this issue. We want to educate them, on that there is a real issue whenever it comes to veterans getting screened. Right now, the average age to start screening is 45, and that's for colon rectal cancer. Most people, are getting cancer, like I said, younger and younger. But those screenings don't start until 45. And so utilizing like the multi-cancer early detection blood test, or the MCED for short, is a way for, doctors to be able to get a little bit more time and, another opportunity for them to be able to get screening. And we want that in the VA. We want to utilize AI services and being able to help with proper diagnosing to, get them to the MCED test for, screening. So there's a lot that we're trying to be able to do on the VA side of the house. But then on the civilian, this is where I think civilian healthcare workers can really help because we have, if anybody has ever been to the doctor, Francine, Jody, please step in. But have you ever been asked, have you served in the military? And I mean, usually you don't, and that's a whole factor. I mean, we get asked, do you feel safe in home? Do you have food in your belly? Do you have, do you have somewhere to lay your head at night? But they're not asking those factors of, have you served in the military? What were you exposed to? Because that goes right back to your health as well. And so we're looking for civilian healthcare partners to start asking those questions to identify veterans, because 60% of veterans don't use, the VA, and that's where most of the civilians think that we're going for healthcare, and that's not the case.
Absolutely. You are absolutely correct. And I mean, I do a mix. There are certain things I go to the VA for, right? Because, I have my disability as well. So I go there for care, but I also have a civilian side. And I make sure I share with them my military experience because, I mean, I just don't know how things are connected. And I'm a pretty smart gal and can look, I do my own research, but something like this really opens my eyes.
That's not an uncommon thing. In fact, a lot of the veterans that we're encountering aren't utilizing the VA. They're diagnosed outside of the VA. And I think that's also part of the problem as well is, when we look at, the signature injury right now for post 9/11 veterans is PTSD and TBI, for those that have deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. But there is not really a full system of people, identifying as veterans that are getting cancer. We have those that go through the civilian healthcare and they get reported, cancer to the state CDC. For those that are active duty, they go on the military side of the house. They have their own reporting, and then the VA has their own reporting that they're sitting there looking at. None of those systems are talking to one another. So how can you identify an issue if, you can't even get a proper, read on what's happening in the community? And that goes even beyond cancer as well. Who knows what all type of, misdiagnostics is happening because of, service related, risks.
Well, and I'm going to give you a case in point. Now, this is not cancer, but it's the same kind of story. So my mom, who served 20 years in the military as well, was just recently diagnosed with ALS. Did you know ALS diagnoses are tied directly back to service? It's something that
Absolutely.
the VA has put together, and you're considered 100% disabled if you get that diagnosis. So when I think about cancer, and if you've served, why isn't the VA connecting that immediately?
hmm Well, and it's interesting when you talk about the VA in general. A lot of people use it for the benefit side,
Mhm.
their VA rating to get compensation. Cancer is not one of those things that you can get, you can get it for TDIU, but once you are cured in remission, then that actual rating goes away. You can get it for like secondary. But cancer is one of those lifelong things. You're more likely to get cancer again and to have your benefits stripped away from you because you are feeling better, really isn't, isn't an appropriate thing. Because I mean, again, you're going to have lifelong, issues usually from your either chemo or your radiation. And I think that's another gap that, hopefully the Veteran Cancer Network is going to be able to invest some time in once we get the screenings figured out.
I want to circle back because while you were all talking, I had this wonderful idea coming back to how the kids could help. What if it's the end of the school year, and I know kids are going to not be doing a whole lot after school's out, and you're going to be riding through their towns during this time. What if you put out your schedule ahead of time to let everyone know where, and almost make it like a big parade where they could cheer you on as you go through their town?
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Our route is planned, by the way. We know exactly what day and what town we're going to be in. I'll have to ask my husband to see if he put it on the website, but it should be, if not, it should be on there relatively soon. But yes, we would love that, and going back to how the kids can help, and I saw this when my husband was going through his infusion. There's a lot of families that are out there that they're in those hospital rooms by themselves, and you get this with a lot of the elderly community as well. I mean, isolation is a real issue, but within the veterans, especially, a lot of them, they're doing this infusion treatment themselves. And so I know a lot of people, when we were on deployment, we would get those handwritten cards from like the third graders and fourth graders. I mean, I loved those. We get so many of them. You feel bad that you couldn't write back to them, but that really does work, and whenever you're, having those long infusion, I mean, you're talking about 8-hour days of just sitting in a chair. So we would love to be able to, share that with the oncology centers that, we're partnering with, that we're working with. Being able to get those handwritten letters, heck, even if you just send them to my house, we'll sit there and distribute it to, the oncology. But then, going back to what Jody said about, other kids, not knowing what other kids are going through, whenever it comes to the family. So my husband and I, we were, obviously very young. Our son was very young at the time. He was in, first grade. And he was going to school like everything was hunky dory and normal and everything, even though we weren't home for weeks at a time. And so, having, kids just, they're resilient, they're great and everything, but, just being friendly, because it's hard, to sit there and be like, oh, so and so's dad has cancer. You don't talk to them. That is, very demoralizing for kids, so just, going out and doing regular fun things, treating them normal too. Like we
Mhm.
lost, people, like they stopped talking to us because they didn't know how to talk to somebody with cancer. And that went the same with our kid as well. So just having that normal conversation, it's like, hey, you want to come play? You want to come over to our house? Sometimes we might say no, because of something going on. But, just being there for your community whenever you get a diagnosis, that is, unfavorable to the family, just treat them normal. And kids are so great about doing that the majority of the time.
I think it depends on how the parents teach them.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
they model everything. So the kids learn by seeing what their parents are going through. And quite frankly, there might be those periods where they're all about to have a meltdown, but then they all might, rally. So there are going to be those moments. But I agree with Ashton that sometimes just some normalcy goes a long way when you're going through something like that. First of all, I had a question. The bike ride that you guys are getting ready to do, I know you have your route picked. Are you guys going to be doing any live podcasting or live streaming, like
That
maybe
was a question I
showing
was
your
just about
bicycle
to.
ride, almost getting run over, whatever that looks like?
Yeah, so we actually we are going to be doing some live recording. I don't know if we're going to be doing it during, because if people are texting and that kind of stuff while we're doing, I don't know if we're going to be able to read and write at the same time. But we will try our best. I am, if anything,
You can wear some meta
hard-headed on that
glasses.
one. Oh, good idea. Actually, we do have some of those. But yes, no, we are going to be doing updates, along the route every day. We're going to be posting a new video. It's probably not going to be our edited versions that we normally have. It's just going to be us raw, me red faced, most likely sweaty and gross, talking about how I'm regretting my decisions. But at the end of the day, that is the whole reason we are doing this is we want to bring awareness on this issue. And, our big thing is we want to be able to, in each town, be able to find a veteran organization, a business, to talk with us, share what they're doing, has cancer impacted their life? Has it not? It doesn't matter. It doesn't even have to be about cancer. Just letting people know that, hey, we're in this town and we want to support them and we want others to support them too.
That would be amazing. That would be just like I was just envisioning what you were saying. You get to a town, maybe there's a restaurant that's veteran owned, right? And you go there, and whatever that is you're highlighting, I just think that's fantastic.
And that's something that we definitely need help with. If there is, and we'll put all of the stops, in the days on our website. I'll make sure that's on there. If there are people that want to, host us or come, come talk with them, if we have availability, we would love to be able to do that. But just send those recommendations over to us, and then I'll reach out, or somebody from my board will reach out so we can talk with them, because this is what this is all about, is that community and, showing how the veterans can come together and hopefully kick cancer's butt.
Yeah, I think you'll get a lot of feedback from once you put out the schedule and you say, hey, we're going to be in your town, and you'll find ways that people are supporting you in those small but big ways, right?
Mhm. Absolutely.
What is your website? So if somebody's watching, they could go check out your website.
It's veterancancernetwork.org, and all of our socials are on there. It's spelled exactly as it sounds. So veterancancernetwork.org, you can go on there, and you can follow us on all of our socials. We're on all of them, to include TikTok. I've yet to actually be comfortable doing any lives on there, but maybe one day. But yeah, we're all on there. Facebook and LinkedIn, those are probably our more popular ones. And then our podcast is on all Apple, Spotify, all the platforms.
I need to find you on LinkedIn.
Yes, please do. Veteran Cancer Network.
Yes.
VeteranCancerNetwork.org.
I have a quick question about the petition. So you have about 9,000 signatures right now, right?
Correct.
And on the Veterans Network that you just talked about, we should be able to find a link to sign the petition,
Correct.
correct?
Yeah. So on our website, you can go on there, and they have an area for the petition on there. It's on the very top bar. They also have like the donate. It talks about Pedal for Impact. It talks about Just Ring the Bell initiative as well. That's one of our fundraisers. So all of
Mhm.
that is on our website, and you can, follow our journey on there as well.
Okay, perfect. That helps me because I'm going to go out and sign.